Good morning. Do you have one of those days where you have like so many things that are planned and it's before Christmas and it's like you have literally 500 things to do and then you step out of the door and you sprain your ankle? That's what I did today. So hello, welcome to Facebook Live. I have sitting in my home, my ankle's propped up. We are going to talk about food allergies and fertility. And we're just going to have a nice Christmas display behind us. I'm at home. And you can see our elf has arrived behind us as well. So thanks for being here today. I'm excited that you are here. I'm excited that you are passionate about fertility and optimizing your health. That is huge because too many times we want to do something, but other things seem to get in the way. And when you are able to prioritize what things that you should be doing, kudos to you because that's hard to do. So we're going to talk about food allergies and how they affect fertility. And what do you think? Do you think food allergies can affect fertility? Let me just go into this a little bit. The goal of fertility is to have a baby, obviously, for that, but we want to reduce inflammation. That's something that we want to do. And if there's any way that we can reduce inflammation in our body in general, we want to do it in order to have a baby. So in general, to make this a really short Facebook Live, we can just basically say food allergies do cause inflammation and we want to reduce that. So yeah, absolutely. You know, if you do have a sensitivity and intolerance, an actual allergy, they all will in turn create an inflammatory cytokine response in your body. And it's not going to be good for an optimal implantation of a baby. But I'm going to go in a little bit more in deep instead of just saying, okay, yes, it does. See you later with that piece. So let's talk a little bit about inflammation because and some of you may be even wondering how does a food allergy cause inflammation? And let's talk about that for a little bit. I wish I had my diagrams here that I could pull up. I don't think you can share Facebook Lives on screen like you can in a video conference yet. I bet it's on their radar. But I'd love to share some images with you guys. But let's talk about how food allergies can cause inflammation to begin with. So what happens when we have a food allergy is we have different things that can cause a not so great gut lining per se. We have things that can actually impact the integrity of that gut lining, and there's lots of different things that can happen and can do that. We'll talk a little bit about those. When you have an impermeable gut lining, if you have a nice, beautiful, nice, hard, rock hard gut lining, nothing can get through, then ideally that's how God made us. He wants us so nothing really can get through to cause an immune activation with that. Now, when we have food sensitivities, that's telling us that we have a gut lining that is permeable or leaky or holy. Things that get through that should not get through can actually go and embed those little particles either intracellularly in between the cells or transcellularly, meaning it goes bam, right and rips through that cell into the tissue below. And that's not good either way, because next thing you know, it gets into your bloodstream and your immune system says, what the heck is this thing doing here? We shouldn't be here. And next thing you're going to have is you're going to have a launched immune attack on your body. And it's more immune activation that we don't need to be dealing with right now if we're trying to get pregnant. We want to keep that inflammation low. Now, we can do things in regards to reducing that load. And this is what some of the things that I do in my practice. I have a functional medicine-based practice, is we can go in there and we can help block that permeable lining, and we can rebuild that tissue, which is so, so cool because you really don't hear about that in the modern medical. But the funny thing is all the research that's being pumped up in the medical journals is there. You know, it's science-based literature. I'm not just making this up. I'm not just waving my wand. This is real stuff that we can do. Now, another thing to think about is that the lining of the digestive tract is 1 cell thick. 1 cell. I mean, how big is 1 cell? Ridiculously small. So when we have 1 cell thick wall lining, that makes it very unstable if things do get out of hand. All right, so we know that we have a barrier system that can be broken through. Some things that can degrade the lining of that gut is stress. Literally, if you hear of stress ulcers, that is what's going on. You have a stress ulcer, and that cortisol that's being pumped out and being released by the body actually can go and thin the lining of your tissue. Think of it like prednisone. If you've known anyone or if you yourself have been on prednisone for a long period of time, that can be very damaging to your tissue because it degrades the lining of that. My dog actually was on prednisone for some issues, and it deteriorated the lining of her discs, of her vertebral discs, and so she has neurological things because of that damage. And that's just a dog, so it can do damage. When we're totally stressed out, our adrenals are pumping out the hormone cortisol, which thins the lining of our tissue, especially of our gut. And you've heard of stress ulcers, or maybe you haven't. Most people, I don't know, maybe you have, maybe you haven't. There are such things as stress ulcers. Stress thins the lining of that stomach. It makes it really raw, and sometimes can get to the degree where it's bleeding and you have a bleeding ulcer, and that's bad news, and you probably should be in your gastroenterologist's office at that point. But we want to reduce that. Now, I want to touch on a little bit about the different terminology used with food allergies, because you might hear food allergy, you might hear food sensitivity or intolerance. Either way, all of them will cause inflammation. So this is where things might get a little bit controversial if you go to an allergist and they're only talking allergy as an IgE type of response. My theory, since I work in functional medicine, I try to optimize people's health. No matter if you've been diagnosed with an anaphylactic type of IgE response, like kids who need an EpiPen because they have peanut allergy or shellfish, whatnot, or you may need that. That's an IgE response. If you don't have an EpiPen and you haven't technically been diagnosed with anything, but you know that when you have that bread, when you go to whatever your favorite place is to eat, you have the bun, you bloat and you get crabby. Or when you have that eggnog, that dairy-based eggnog, that you literally, you get more acne. You just do not feel well. You have major gas. You have constipation. If you know that food impacts you negatively and that you can pinpoint it, then you got something going on and that your immune system is not dealing well with food. And if we live in a society that's totally stressed out, which we do, then we know we have a higher likelihood of having that response to that food. So my point is, food allergy, sensitivity, intolerance, doesn't matter. It'll all cause inflammation. I'm going to link a paper that I found from the Journal of Endocrinology just a few years ago that was published, and the title of it's Connecting Female Infertility to Obesity, Inflammation, and Maternal Gut Dysbiosis. Connecting infertility to maternal gut dysbiosis. Right there. I mean, this is in the literature. If you have gut dysbiosis, something's going on within the lining of your gut because you have stress, because you have medication that you're taking, like a proton pump inhibitor, if you're taking things that shut down your acid production because you think you have too much, that is damaging the lining of your gut. Infections, which is another huge component, that people live with infections in their gut, and you need to find them and get rid of them, because that will cause more inflammation and more food intolerances in your body. So if you have gut dysbiosis, you have a higher chance of being infertile. I don't see why there's anything wrong with saying that, because it's in the literature. It's connecting. There are links behind this. Other ways that you may have a food sensitivity, besides the stress, besides medication that you may be taking, that aspirin even really deteriorates the lining of your gut. And infections, if you have H. pylori, if you have a known infection that you went overseas and you traveled to Mexico and you got into some water, those things, those infections can actually cause issues with your body. Yesterday, I do a lot of testing in my office, and we had a patient that we got her stool test back, and she had a worm. She had a whipworm, and we would have never thought that she, she would have probably never thought before she came to me that she had a worm in her stool, in her body, thriving in her environment. And that is not good news. We need to get rid of that stuff so that can decrease the inflammation, and then she can actually thrive in her body. There are other ways that you may have food sensitivities, and a lot of this is genetic related. So different things that you might hear about when you hear about food allergies is celiac disease, which is the inability for your body or the person's body to tolerate a nutrient from the food source called gluten. You'll hear a lot about gluten. Gluten is very damaging to our bodies, and especially those who are genetically susceptible to have an immune response to gluten, their body's going to tear itself apart. When I say autoimmune, it means that your body is attacking itself. That's not good. You want our body to take care of itself. We have an innate responsibility that governs us that should do the right things. And when things go wrong in our body, that's when all hell breaks loose. So the celiac is one particular genetic component that you may find. There's also one that I see a lot of in my office because I specialize in this, which is histamine intolerance. There is a gene called DAO. If you have Dr. Ben Lynch's, and if you're a groupie of MTHFR, if you've heard of that particular genetic polymorphism, there are many genes. There's a book called Dirty Genes by Ben Lynch. I'll link that one too, that he picks 7 particular genes to dive into. And he's found that the clinical research within these genes have been found to be really affecting our body. There's this gene called DAO, which stands for diamine oxidase, which breaks down histamine. Certain people are born with a dirty DAO gene, meaning that if you think about in terms of a gene that you're born with it not necessarily working as optimally as it could be compared to someone else. Think of it also in terms of like a road or Highway 40 if you're here in St. Louis. You want to drive down a nice big road with no traffic to get to your destination. When there are things and obstacles in your way, such as traffic, such as accidents or protesters, you want to get around that. And that's what's going on with someone who has polymorphisms in these particular genes, like DAO. DAO helps clear histamine. And sometimes people who do have this genetic polymorphism are more susceptible for food sensitivities. And you might be one of those, or your friend is, or your mom is. And whatever they eat, you know that they're going to have a rash, or they're going to get bloated, or now they have a headache again. You have those people, and that they're just genetically born and wired a little bit to be more sensitive to this. And you add in some other things on top of it, like stress, like an exposure to a pathogen when they went to Mexico, and it just makes that highway a lot more jam-packed. And so they can't get through, and it's harder for your body to process things. So the beautiful thing about functional medicine is that we can see where those things and where those pathways are blocked, and we can open them up a little bit, and we can assess the whole situation and see, okay, do we have a food sensitivity? Are we dealing with too much stress? Do you have a pathogen in your gut that's causing some issues? It was so interesting. If you go back on our Facebook page, I just found a research article that was published in the journal. I forget which journal it was, but I just posted it on the Facebook page back, that it says that women who have preeclampsia, which is the high blood pressure when you get to term with your child, a lot of women have to be induced and they can't go further along because it's too risky for the baby. That preeclampsia is actually a risk made because the semen actually is dealing with microbes, with a pathogen in the semen. I mean, it goes back genetically to that piece, which I find is so interesting because so many women have preeclampsia. And why is that? We got to take care of the whole body. But But hopefully that DAO analogy, the genetic factor, and that goes in terms with MTHFR. And I know a lot of people have questions about MTHFR that we can dive into a lot more in the future as well. But there's different ways and different reasons why people will develop a food sensitivity, whether it's a genetic predisposition, whether you have the stress involved with degrading the lining of the gut, causing it more permeability, causing things to get through. And the thing that you have to think of too is that when you do have that gut situation where it's kind of looking like Swiss cheese and things are kind of popping through that they shouldn't get through, you got to think about nutrient absorption, and especially with fertility and having a baby. Because if you're not absorbing the nutrients that you're consuming from Whole Foods, say you're going to Whole Foods and you're spending excellent money on wonderful products, good organic food, or Trader Joe's, whatever it is. You're getting good nutrients in your body, or even a prenatal that you're taking. If you're buying the high dollar prenatal, you want to be absorbing those nutrients, right? So we need to make sure that your digestive system is in the optimal state so it can break down those nutrients, break down the fats, the good fats that you need, break down the carbohydrates that you're getting from your foods, and break down the protein. Protein's huge. We need, I think there's a statistic, 90% of your child is made of protein, and our body needs to make it. It's really, really hard to maintain a healthy pregnancy and a non-protein diet. It's a very crucial area for methylation. We have this methionine cycle. I'm getting a little bit nerdy on you, but the methionine cycle actually creates protein, and it needs protein to methylate. And if you have a genetic polymorphism in MTHFR, and you're not eating protein and producing it, that's not good. So we need to make sure that we have that piece in the picture with that. Okay, so that's the DAO enzyme, that's the celiac, the autoimmune, and so we need to make sure we're absorbing nutrients. Just another little note on that with the nutrient absorption is that if your gut kind of looks like Swiss cheese and you're not absorbing things, you're not going to get that B12 absorbed very well. And that's one marker that will show up when we run more blood testing to see if you have food sensitivities, but also mainly that is for anemias. Anemia means lack of oxygen. If you don't have oxygen in your body, is your brain going to work well? No, it's not. So we need to make sure we have all the right carrying capacities in our body to carry an oxygen molecule. And we need our red blood cells to be on par. In order to make a red blood cell, we need nutrients. And where do we get those nutrients? From our food. And if our gut's not digesting well, are we getting those nutrients? Nope. I mean, seriously, it goes back that far. You just connect the dots right here. That's what we do. So B12, iron are crucial nutrients to make a red blood cell to carry oxygen, especially if you got a little one in your belly, in your placenta, attached. All that blood is being filtered through that. So when you have a food sensitivity, when you have a food allergy, we want to make sure all of your barrier systems in your body are nice and beautiful. One of the barrier systems in your body is the placenta barrier. And there's research been shown that when people are stressed out, those stress hormones can actually push through and go through those barriers of the placenta and affect the fetus. So your baby gets stressed out when you get stressed out. So if you are pregnant and watching this, be sure to tell your husband not to stress you out because it's affecting the baby. You can literally say that. So, or anyone else. Do things that you need to do to decrease your stress level. And that's a whole piece within itself. We're talking about food allergies, but stress impacts and can cause food allergies with that piece. So keep that in mind. So how do we assess the lining of the gut? Right? Might be what you might be thinking. Well, how do I know if I have a leaky gut? One, do you have symptoms? You got symptoms. Do you feel bloated? Do you feel itchy? Do you get an itchy? I do. I get an itchy head when I get certain things. Psoriasis, eczema, people with kids might find that. But there's so many different symptoms that can be related. It doesn't have to be gut related. You may not be that person that gets bloated and has gas and has diarrhea or constipation. You may not be that person with food allergies. You may be that person that when you eat foods, your brain goes south and you just can't function, or you turn into Krabby Patty. And go a little bit crazy. So you don't have to have those particular gut symptoms. But I want to throw this in here in case you're kind of curious. On my website, I do have a download that's called the Top Diet Changes if your child or you has MTHFR. In this free download that you can get from my website, it will give you I have a bonus section in there that is for digestion assessment. And there's a list of these different markers that you can just kind of look through and see if you are dealing with a need for improving your digestion. And you can get that at enlightenstl.com. I'll put that link as well. But it's just a free download that I put together that you can look at to assess your gut lining. So there's testing as well. There's different food testing. There's serum blood food allergy testing out there, which is IgG, IgA type of food allergy testing. There's IgE type of food testing as well, and that's going to be more of your anaphylactic type of stuff with your peanut allergies, stuff that the EpiPen is needed for. So there's those different types of food allergy testing. There's also other labs that run cytokine panels to look for food reactions with that. So cytokines are basically like little messengers that are just kind of swarming all around your body, and they get activated when certain things happen. So when you eat certain foods, certain particular cytokines may get activated, and we can measure those activated cytokines in there. So there's a cell-mediated type of test called the MRT test. It's a pricey one. I've dabbled in that one a little bit in my practice. It is an expensive one. And my question, what might be out there, is the reliability of these different tests with food sensitivities. What I find with these particular food tests is I don't start off there with patients because if you do have an immune response that is not what it should be because we have too much stress going on, do you think you're going to launch a proper response to it? Not necessarily. So I don't do that as my first line of testing for everyone. Can it be helpful and beneficial? Yes, it can. And especially if you're someone who likes to see those hardcore numbers as far as, or your husband, do I have this issue? You can run it. It could be false negative. It may not show up even though it's there. So the reliability of these tests aren't to the degree that I would like to have them, but they can be helpful, and especially in children who cannot communicate very well with us. So you have to just weigh the risks and see, okay, is it worth the investment? Is it worth the stress of having the skin, the blood drawn? And if anything, it gives you an idea of where to guide yourself. Sometimes people come back in certain tests that I do, and they react to everything. In those particular cases, their immune system is so ramped up that they are launching responses on certain things or everything. And so it's a bigger fish that you're dealing with than that. There's also stool tests that I like to use in my practice to really assess food, really integrity of the lining of your gut, because it'll tell us if we're dealing with a pathogen. It'll tell us what our microbiome environment is looking like. And if we're dealing with any type of pathogen or fungal overgrowth, then we can work to get rid of that to optimize that environment. So then you're not going to put you at a higher risk for being susceptible to food sensitivities. So stool tests I love them. They can be pretty pricey. But when you look at the price of what you're going through, whether it's through IVF, infertility, the stress, time, when you get these tests and you say, wow, I can actually guide my care a little bit, I can eradicate some things, decrease the inflammation, man, you're going to have a healthier body for yourself that you can take care of your baby and your future babies. Zonulin is something, if you've heard of zonulin, Zonulin. Zonulin is a protein that is used as an early predictor for gestational diabetes. That is taken straight out of a journal that was published in March of last year, 2017. And zonulin is a protein that can be measured in serum and in fecal matter and in stool that can tell us a predictability of the integrity of the lining of a gut. So it's a protein that can be released in terms of stress when there is intestinal permeability. That means when the intestine lining actually kind of splits apart a little bit. And so that can be a marker to look at as well when we're looking at different things. That particular marker is on the DNA stool test that I typically run with people, so we can see how bad is your leaky gut. There's also other testing. We're in the testing phase now, talking about that. There is a company called Cyrex. Cyrex is a immune test company up on the West Coast, and they have certain arrays that they can look at. There's one particular array, which is a panel, it's a blood panel that you can do, that is called the intestinal antigenic permeability screen. It has about 7 markers in there to assess permeability, to see how bad your gut really is torn apart. It will look at actomycin, occludin, zonulin, the different types of your immune system, something else called lipopolysaccharides, LPS. LPS is also a technical term that I like to look at when you're dealing with a food sensitivity, because lipopolysaccharides are produced with endotoxins. And when you have an endotoxin, that's basically, you have a pathogen. You got a critter living inside you that is producing debris. Or you can think of it like a peanut. When you go, a peanut shell, say you go to the baseball game, you love the Cardinals, and you get some peanut shells. When you take that peanut and you crack it open, you get a lot of this peanut debris that falls to the floor or gets on your pants, it's just messy. Well, that debris is like the lipopolysaccharides, and you can measure that. You can measure how much peanut dust is kind of floating around in your body if you think of the peanut as a bad guy. So you can measure that level of lipopolysaccharides in your blood to see, is there something going around that's causing you to have these food sensitivities in the first place? Do you have a worm that's punching holes through your lining of your gut? Do you have an underlying infection? Are you dealing with even some viral components, Epstein-Barr, mold? I keep bringing that in because that's huge. Not everybody struggles with it, but if you're dealing with a water damage billing, there's a genetic factor in there that can cause your body to produce more histamine and to cause more issues. Next thing you know, you're just reacting to so many foods out there. So there's different triggers that can cause your body to develop a food sensitivity. Now, the gold standard is food elimination. As crazy as that sounds, it really is. So when you remove those foods from your body, you get the best result of what's going on. So food elimination. If you need help with food elimination style of diet, seek out a functional medicine practitioner. They will help you with this. Seek out a nutritionist that's trained in this to help you remove those inflammatory foods, to assess how you feel and add them back into your diet. So food elimination really is the gold standard when you're looking at food allergy response. Let me give you some steps here as I conclude. If you or your spouse have food allergies, intolerances, sensitivities, just stop eating those foods. And it can be hard to do, especially around this time of the year when you're getting bombarded with cookies and whatnot. But if you got issues, just stop it. Make yourself a video of yourself and explain to yourself, I feel like this when I eat this food. I'm not going to do this again. It's hard. Sometimes it's a more neurological type of response, but just stop it. If you suspect you may have them, but you need some guidance, like I was saying earlier, find a functional medicine practitioner to help you with elimination style of diet and to get some food testing with that. So those are some actionable things that you can do. What has worked for you? I want to hear. Put it in the comments below. Let me see what questions, if there's any questions on here. I'm not seeing any questions. I'm seeing some comments that are just like cheering me on, which I love it. people are interested in this topic. And yes, listen to this later. Share this with someone that you love, that you know you're thinking about, that you find valuable with this. So share this with someone with you love. You can also go to our Facebook page and basically sign up for our free download, which is 10 easy ways to boost fertility naturally. And you can do that as well. So guys, I'm signing off. I need to flip the ice on my ankle because I sprained it this morning walking out the door, and I have 5 million things to do still. But no worries, they'll get done because I'm mom. And but anyway, that's it. I hope you've enjoyed this. You have a wonderful, wonderful holiday season. Merry Christmas. And we'll see you next week. Dr. Felicity will be joining you after Christmas. And she, I believe, is talking about coffee and water, which is huge. So join us again. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.